Hey guys,
Hey, Stu.
sorry for the late start. Excuse me.
Hey, Jeff, Gary.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing fine.
Is that a co-op t-shirt?
Co-op? No, it's not. It's a Electrify Now t-shirt.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. How could I have forgotten it? Didn't include now though, so I guess
Doesn't
it's
know, right?
usable.
Yeah.
So your cycling has been kind of a little slow of late, huh?
Very slow. I've been off the bike for a week. I don't,
Well.
it's too much. I've gone out and done errands with my mask on, but it's not very good.
Well, I wouldn't recommend it. I've got an app that you might want to look at just once. That's Shit I Smoke, and it's a app that takes the air quality index data and transforms it into the equivalent number of cigarettes that you might have smoked given your exposure. And it's sobering.
Terrible.
Indeed.
4 o'clock, folks, and we have a quorum. And we have Chris, and I saw a message from Tanya. It says she's here but can't see herself.
You can't see her either. There's Chris.
So
Tanya, did you join from the panelist link on your email?
That's what's going on.
So briefly, I know we're just about
you can
started.
move her. You can shift her.
Let me just say before we get too excited, Elizabeth is out today. I have a totally unfamiliar computer and I'm running the show. So I will do my best here.
We have every confidence in you.
Let me see if I can pull Tanya in here.
You can change her classification.
I mean, I know I can, but let me.
it says I know what it is. I'll come back in.
Here she comes.
Okey-doke.
Okay. Hey, Tanya.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry for the late start, folks. I've had trouble getting in here, so.
No problem. I think we're ready to go now, though. So let's come to order. There's the consent agenda. It has the meeting minutes on it. I have one question. It seemed to imply, well, it wasn't clear whether Ray or Jeff was going to lead the path off natural gas in the minutes. So can one of you say who's the lead on that?
I think my understanding was that we would co-lead that. But Ray, what was your understanding?
I didn't know there was a gap. I remember at one time we took names off, but
Oh, this is for the look ahead now. It's not actually in the document.
oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I'm fine with that, Jeff.
Okay,
Is that all right, Rick?
it's up to you guys.
Okay.
It just was not, my memory in the minutes didn't jive. So I wanted to ask about it. And I'm not particularly interested in correcting the minutes. So is there a motion?
Move approval.
All in favor? Unanimous. Very good. Announcements. The next meeting is September 9th. Council update. Tanya?
Hello. I don't know that there is much of an update. We haven't seen anything most recently about the potential zero interest loan, which I think was the last major piece that council took up. So I think we're, I don't know of anything that has been particularly climate related since we met last. I'm not sure I have any updates.
Okay. Not particularly a good sign, but there you are.
Well, I think just if I can, the big thing that I think is coming is that next step in the loan program. We've gotten through that first small step, but I understand, Stu, that you're going to need some more approvals from council as we move through the process of hopefully securing that funding and building the program. So that's mostly what I've been watching for, is when I can engage with the other counselors when that comes forward, because we certainly didn't get it passed with the level of support that I think we would like to see. So I think there's some more engagement and maybe educational efforts that need to be done when that happens. Does that sound right, Stu? That's when we can expect more. That's the next
Yeah.
steps that council should see.
I think so. You know, I was going to speak to it in my update, but I really don't know how long it'll take to hear back from USDA. It could be next week. It could be in 6 months. So really, we're just kind of waiting. If I wait long enough, then I'll check in with them. But it's only been a few weeks since we submitted. So I imagine they have their legal review and all. But I'm optimistic. So we've already gotten through the first hoop, which is the hardest one. So hopefully it'll all come through. I do think there's room for outreach to the folks who didn't support it before, if anybody is motivated to do that. But at the same time, it's not urgent because we haven't been approved. So, you know, that's all I can say about it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And I think it would be good to just kind of share the context. We do now have 2 new interim major elements of our administrative team in terms of our interim city manager and an interim finance director. They've just come on as of last week. So there's a lot of transition happening at the city right now. It's actually good that we're not we don't have something sitting right in front of council at the moment. But the other piece is that we are heading into our extra set of study sessions where we are taking up the chronic financial shortfall in the general fund. And so we don't have that schedule entirely laid out, but the first meeting is August 23rd, I believe. And so there'll be a lot of heavy discussions about what services and what service levels the city can and should and will provide among the different programs in the general fund. So just know that there's a lot happening, and our capacity at the city right now is pretty low. So if there is something that this group needs to take forward, I'm happy to do that. But it's not a bad thing if there isn't something that needs immediate attention from the council at this point.
Bob?
Yeah, that's just a couple of comments. One is, fortunately, this program would not be funded in the general fund, so it shouldn't be caught within that smash because it's from the electricity fund. The second thing is, Stu, it probably wouldn't hurt to reach out to USDA because they operate on a fiscal year which ends September 30th, and if they're trying to, typically federal agencies commit a lot of money in the fourth quarter. So they may be trying to cram to get that through. Hopefully they are, because otherwise then it really could roll down for a long time.
Yeah, I
But it's
figured
right.
I'd give them 4 weeks and then check in. So
Yep. And just your point is well taken, Bob, in terms of where these funds sit. But I think we also want to avoid any confusion, and it's hard to contain the conversation about the city's financial situation to the general fund. So I think it's not a bad thing that they're not overlapping the conversation about this funding source and this program and the general fund. But your point is very well taken. And for anybody who's having those conversations in the larger community, it's really important that we understand that the issue the city's having sits in the general fund. It's not in the electric department. It's not water or wastewater or AFN. It really is fire, police, parks, and planning, the major elements of our general fund. So that's where we're hoping to contain the conversation about service levels and how we invest the public money in the general fund.
Right.
Yeah, this will probably follow into Stu's update, but what I seem to remember, Tanya, in that council meeting was the concern of staffing for the billing in the city acting as an intermediary seemed to be the 2 concerns for the votes against it.
Yeah, there were 2 kind of elements.
Which they kind of saw as an expansion over what we already do. And maybe they don't already know what we already do. So, yeah.
I think some education and just, answering direct questions from counselors would probably go a long way in prepping this for when it comes back to us. the two main things that I heard the same things. It was, this isn't something the city does. Well, we do know that we already have this in place and have had it in place for a while. And whether it was appropriate, given our staffing shortages that we continue to talk about, to add this project on. I thought staff did a really nice job in the staff communication of explaining how that would be handled within the existing resources that we have for this program. But I think it always is helpful to sit down and have a conversation and answer in real time questions that come up as people are thinking about it. It sometimes is hard to do that in the middle of a council meeting. So I think sometime before it comes back before council, it would be very good for members of this commission, and I'm happy to help with that, to reach out to individual councilors and help them understand the boundaries of this, and what it does and doesn't mean in terms of city staffing.
Okay. Anything else, Tanya? Otherwise, we move on to staff update. Stu?
All right. So I guess maybe the first news I would share is that since Adam has departed, I have been moved completely over to the electric department. The electric director is now my supervisor. Not that that affects any of you, but I think it's an interesting development in the org chart. I'm still hoping to deploy our participation in this EV car share that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Still trying to lock in the final details of that. Let's see what else we have. Waiting on the RESP. That's a big thing for me right now. We've had our first couple of folks apply for our induction cooktop incentive, which is great. They reported that they were well supported by the local vendors and had no installation issues, and that the form was easy. So that was all positive feedback to hear. Let's see. I think right now I've been doing a lot of catching up since doing the REST project, and also with the administration change, just kind of recalibrating a little bit, see where the priorities are. And I guess the last thing I would say, excuse me, the smoke is getting to me, is that, if we do stand up a REST program, it is going to take some of my time initially. But I'm one of the staff people that has a fairly flexible workload, so I can let some things go for a while I stand up that program. The idea is that once it's stood up, it'll be self-sustaining. So I don't want to say it's not going to take any staff time, but it's going to be fairly minimal. So as we get into that, it's kind of a nuance I want to convey. And if anybody thinks that you might engage in some outreach to anybody, any decision makers or contractors, anyone, maybe check in with me first, just so I know what conversations are happening. I think I'm going to just wrap it up there. I think we're running a little behind, so are we right on?
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning to the commission that NRU has offered to make a presentation. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Right, yeah. So NRU, which is the Northwest Requirement Utilities Group, it represents all of the utilities that purchase the bulk of their power from BPA. So everybody like Ashland, who's primarily a BPA customer, they represent those utilities' interests. So they've agreed to come in a month from now at the next meeting and spend an hour talking to us about what the future holds. They've been doing a lot of research and analyses about future power contracts and looking at the landscape of things. So they are one of the organizations, I think, who are well qualified to speak about what the future looks like and what potential BPA contracts might include or not include. So it'll be a great opportunity to ask them questions. If you have questions about the power contract, get those ready, please. And it will try to share some information from their presentation ahead of time, if possible. So that's just something to look forward to. I think we'll spend the full hour at least with them. So, and we'll have to double check. Rick, as I recall, September, we were dropping back to 2 hours. Is that right? Or we need to revisit that?
Actually leads me to my next question. I have a note that says at the August 3rd council meeting, there'd be a discussion about how commission meetings would evolve. And so if either you or Tanya can speak to that.
I think
Yes,
Tanya's-
we did have that conversation, and it was in a study session. So what we've done is we've sent staff forward. There were a couple different questions, some of which were related specifically to council meetings, but the ones that were the focus around the commission meetings was, do we create a standard policy so that commissions can make their own decisions about whether they meet all in person or all online? So you could set a schedule essentially and say, for this part of the year, we'll meet in person, and this part of the year we meet online, or whatever, but you have that flexibility. So council went ahead and directed staff to come back with a standard policy so that commissions can answer those questions and set their own structure. So you should be able to decide as a commission which way you'd like to meet and at what points of the year. There will not be a hybrid option for commissions. So if you decide to meet in person, you're in person. If it's online, it's entirely online. But you can, it looks like what they're going to come back with us is the ability for commissions to have that flexibility to kind of go back and forth between those types of meeting schedules if they need to, or if they decide they want to.
Okay, and what will this mean for September?
For September, we are still in our declared state of emergency. I don't anticipate that. I think we're going to keep renewing it. So I think you're fine for September to meet electronically.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we the last time we renewed the declaration of emergency, we thought we were maybe coming to the end of it. We thought 2 more months because everything was lifting. I don't think we're going to be thinking that now. I think we're in for a while longer. So I'm expecting, my hope is that we'll be able to have that more uniform policy in place by the time that the emergency declaration runs out.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Stu?
No, I was just thinking about the emergence of Delta and the mask mandate, and it seems like probably likely that we should continue the Zooms for a while. But...
Yes, that is certainly my preference, and it sounds like we have that. Well, that's what we need to do now because of the state of emergency has been extended. So I don't know that there's any debate. I just wanted to know what the answer was.
Yeah. And then just one other thing, Tom McBartlett has hooked me into a webinar series for elected officials that goes into kind of more about the power grid and how it works and how these arrangements work with different utilities and communities. So the webinar series just got started, and I'll be attending those regularly. And if there's things that are of interest to this group, I will bring them back.
Great. Okay, so I assume you're done, Stu. Other announcements from commissioners? Jeff?
Had a couple things. One, Oregon Department of Energy will release a zero emission vehicle report in September. This is a biennial report, so it should have information about the current status of charging facilities in Oregon on the I-5 corridor. So that should be of interest to us. And then we're working to set up a conference call with this breach collective attorney who is working with the city of Eugene. And this is to kind of come up to speed on what the legal options and constraints are in terms of regulating natural gas. So if you're interested in participating in that, Stu and Ray in particular, let me know. We're targeting either the 16th or the 24th of this month. So just let me know separately.
Gary?
The comments that we provided to the council on the climate-friendly rulemaking were approved by the council and have been submitted to DLCD. And the climate rulemaking task force will be meeting on the 18th. And I will send out a webinar link for that to each of you so that if you choose to participate, you can. I have never participated in their meetings, so I can't tell you anything about them, but it should be interesting.
Okay. Chris, I think you were going to talk about the housing capacity analysis report briefly. Is that right?
Yes, so the housing capacity analysis, that report was finalized and completed. I think in terms of rolling in CPC recommendations, we did get good representation in that regard on a number of levels. Those were formalized in the final planning report. I'm not sure if Brandon has made that available yet. I can follow up and distribute that among the commission here. I check in with Brandon when that report is public.
I'd certainly like to see it, so that would be great.
Great.
Let's see, we have no other commission representatives.
I have a question.
Right.
So is that a plan we want to track in our formal planning?
I think it would be worthwhile to see how it evolves. I mean, right now it was primarily analytical, but in terms of how that is applied into actual policy and implemented, I think it would be worthwhile to see, you know, essentially where theory and recommendation meet mandate. So I would be interested in seeing how that actually takes form and shape.
Okay, I first was thinking of just in terms of getting CPC input or SEEP input into the plan, and how much of it makes it into the plan. So I don't know if Chris, you provided most of the input for that, and
I did on a number of levels within the sort of structure of ECHO Northwest in terms of their outline and their framework essentially in their study. You know, how we correspond now from here with the planning department, I think is more of an interdepartmental liaison format, which I'd be happy to represent CPC on that.
okay, that sounds good. I
Yep.
think I can add it to our sheet, and I'll send you an email offline on it.
Great, thank you, Rick.
Okay, public forum. We had 2 items from SOCAN Ashland Climate Action Project. I think it's ACAP mini event. You should all have received those in writing. One was about CPC must reconvey the priority of climate action in Ashland's current strategic planning process. And the other was an invitation to important city policy Zoom webinar, August 19th. Rethinking Streets, Lessons for Ashland. So I want to note that the commission received those. On the old business, Ray, I think you had volunteered to take the action items this month.
That's correct.
Is there a volunteer for next month? Bob, thank you. Commissioner recruitment. I had a chat with one person that was potentially interested. I'm not going to name names until there's actually an application. But if there's anybody out there that would like to apply, there are still 2 open positions on the commission, plus 2 student positions. Okay, formal planning. Ray?
Okay. I don't know if you remember last time I talked about 2 plans that were originally planned to be adopted this year, the TAP master plan and the stormwater and drain master plan. Scott took those off the look ahead. A new look ahead came out yesterday. I still don't see those. So I know the runway is getting short for the end of the year. I'll have to touch base with him and see if he still plans on this year or moving him into next year. I did notice for the stormwater that he's going to council in September with some code updates. I wouldn't expect that should change the master plan, but obviously things are still changing. And I think I mentioned last time we got some additional money for the TAP design for Ashland to look at supplying water in emergency cases to Talent and Phoenix. So maybe they're putting that into the plan too. He also needed to get agreement between the other cities. So that's probably what's taking some more time on that one. as far as the TSP update, Transportation Systems Plan, there's 8/17 council meeting to approve a contract to kick that off. So we'll see how that goes. I know, Gary, you've been involved with that, and I think we'll talk more about working with the Transportation Commission later in this meeting. As far as the 10-year study, I think I know staff has been overwhelmed on that, but maybe this NRU meeting will be first of the reviews to start working on that. And then also, as far as the pool, we know that sort of got delayed due to funding. And as Tanya mentioned, that's one of the key things from the general fund, and council has a meeting in August to discuss with Parks and Rec their funding. So we'll see where that goes. And that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Ray.
I think Bob has a question.
Oh, sorry, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Ray, when Tanya and I were talking about the vulnerability assessment for the CPC update that's in the packet this time, I've realized that I don't really ever ask, and I'm assuming when you look at all these plans, you're looking at the second goal as well, not just the mitigation goal, but also the resilience goal of the SEEP. And I'm wondering if you are identifying as you're going along specific vulnerabilities that you think we should be focusing our attention to, or the city should be focusing its attention to, because like the tap, there's clearly vulnerabilities that came to light last year when the tap was cut or was down for after the Almeida fire. Similarly with with any of the other kinds of plans, there's climate related impacts that need to be taken into account, and I assume Scott is also doing that. But I just wonder if that's also on your as part of your list as you're going through these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been a number of plans this year related to water where we've raised that issue, right? Yeah. Water supply and versus water demand, and what does the future water supply look like? So we certainly have put that in. This housing study may be another one, that we just added in terms of adaptability. And I would agree that that's a good point, because I think Ashland, from a climate impact, adaptability is going to probably hit us harder than anything else, as we're seeing now.
As it
this week.
Is.
Okay. I'll try to bring up things like that as they come out.
Yeah, just struck me that that's not something that I normally look at right away. I think Tanya's among us probably the most attuned to that sort of thing, and it just kind of occurred to me.
Yeah, I think in our it's good for us as we go through these plans to look at that and take them one by one. So, for example, the electric 10-year plan, we're looking at resiliency and fire and exposure to the grid and demand and all that. So yeah, we try to look at that as well. As all of us should.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Ray.
Quick little add-on to that is that since I'm now able to talk to Tom a little more easily, he's definitely aware that we are working on the electric plan and is willing to help with that. Right now, they're tying up actually a bunch of assessments that are related specifically to fire impacts on our electrical grid. So he was telling me last time we talked that once they wrap up with that work, he'll be a little more available to work on the 10-year plan bit, which I think the fire assessment will feed into that quite well.
Gary, did you have your hand up?
No, I did not. Thank you, though.
Tanya?
Thanks. My question is actually maybe to Stu, and that's around and Ray around the electric master plan or the energy master plan. Have we started having any conversations about how our local process will be impacted potentially positively by the state making the clean energy goal of 100% clean energy by 2040? Is there, you know, I imagine there's some connection between what we're trying to do here locally and what that looks like, but it's very early on. They just signed the bill, or the governor just did. So is there a conversation that we should start to have with Tom perhaps about how the state level goal might impact what we're trying to do, or might bring more resources to what we're trying to do here locally?
I think it's too soon to say whether there's any resources available. I think it's pretty early still.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there will definitely be a connection there. What exactly it is, I'm not sure. And you know, a lot of the rules that have been established so far really seem to pertain more to the investor-owned utilities.
Mhm.
Although everybody's required to toe the line, we just don't know exactly what that means yet, or at least I don't. So I'll keep you posted if I hear anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're really interested to see if there's any money available for updating or changing your grid or power backup, resiliency, that kind of thing.
So one of the bills that passed the legislature, SB 762, called Wildfire Response, requires electric utilities to prepare a wildfire protection plan. And as far as I could see, that applied to all electric utilities, not just the publicly owned.
Yeah, that's the assessment I just referred to a minute ago.
And then another thing that's happening all along those lines that we definitely need to keep track of is the program that DEQ and DOE are putting together that might result in a funding stream that the city can apply for. So we need to keep our eye on that as well.
I was in a meeting with a DEQ director for an hour earlier this week with SOCAN, and we had a lot of questions about his plan, and he, you know, so it was a very informed meeting. But yeah.
Okay, so I think we are ready to move on to Transportation Commission coordination. I put a copy of an email from Scott Flurry into the packet. Mostly I wanted to be sure that the CPC was aware of this communication going on. And so Stu had actually sent it on to me to use in the agenda, and I felt just copying it was the best thing to do. The big issue I think that's being raised, that I'd like to hear what people's thoughts are, but I'm not thinking we need to resolve this tonight. And just to give a little more context, the Wildfire Safety Commission, CPC, CCOC, and Transportation Commission will be having representatives gathering together next Monday to discuss coordination. And so having some idea how people are thinking about the concept that was raised about this email about primary commission, to me brings up a very difficult to resolve issue, because the mandate of CPC inevitably overlaps with the mandates of virtually everything else that the city does and all the other commissions. And so if CPC was always to defer to other commissions, we might not ever say anything. Is one, you know, to put it really broadly and bluntly. And so how we handle that, if folks have immediate thoughts about that, now would be a good time to express them so I can convey those thoughts during this meeting next Monday. Gary and then Jeff.
I concur in your perspective. Leave it at that. We've got a big job to do, as does every other commission in the city. We have to make sure we're delivering.
I've got a couple comments. One is, as you described, Rick, what Scott is put on paper here is a business as usual scenario. So, and I think in the area of climate change, we need to move beyond that. And the one example there are things that cross over. So electric vehicle charging is a big issue, and the transition there to electrification and transportation. Are they going to take the lead on that? So that's a good example, I think, of one of these issues that falls in the middle of several commissions.
So I'm sorry, you done, Jeff?
Yes.
To me, this is something that perhaps we can resolve with representatives of each of the commissions, but in the end, it's really council's prerogative to decide whether they want independent advice from each of the commissions, or whether they want the commissions to get together and bring forward a coherent thought to the council, or what, you know, what is it the council actually wants? And so I wanted to bounce that to you, Tanya, not suggesting that you might know the exact answer to it, but that's, I think, an open question.
I think the council is open to having ideas brought forward. You know, we've talked in a number of occasions about the council seems to be supportive of the ideas of commissions working together to work on projects or issues that cross those commission boundaries. I wouldn't suggest waiting for the council to identify that it wants to see a particular amount of collaboration, because it's just simply not at the top of the council's mind at the moment. I think that this is the kind of thing that needs to come from the commissions themselves. Commissions can work out what that might look like and then bring it forward to the council as one of the ways that we meet our SEEP goals. But I wouldn't be concerned at all that council hasn't asked for this level of collaboration specifically.
Okay, Ray? I can't hear you, Ray.
I'm thinking over the next year with, we'll talk about our work plan at the end of the meeting, but the other commissions would be aware of what our focus items are. And we should be able to tell if that overlaps what they're planning on working on the next year as well, related to specific commission, you know, for example, the transportation. So maybe that would help to at least narrow the field down in terms of the inputs we're looking for, or the goals, and you know, we're trying to achieve short term.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I sort of read this fairly narrowly, frankly, and it doesn't seem particularly unreasonable. I think the operative sentence is the TC requests that before any council action is requested of the CPC or the COCC regarding a transportation-related element in a planning document. So if we're going to ask for something in the transportation system plan, for example, they're asking that the Transportation Commission be consulted, and if necessary, even take a lead in the process. And that doesn't seem particularly outrageous. I mean, we're going to be working closely with them on this, and with Public Works Director. It's kind of the normal process of business. It doesn't say that if we disagree, if we don't agree, that that they think that we should. How could they say we couldn't talk to the council? The council has the right to hear from any of its advisory commissions, but it's as a general practice, we want to work together. And then they point to a very good example where we collaborated, right off the bat. So I read this as, on a planning document, they feel some, sense that they're shepherding it. They are, in fact, Transportation Commission is the one that's kind of shepherding the transportation systems plan, I think. But there are a lot of community groups, including advisory commissions, that will have input in it. And just to have an orderly conversation, we should probably, try to, consult them with our input and go there first before going to the council. Doesn't seem like such a big deal to me.
Gary?
I think, to call out the elephant in the room, it was the urban land use and transportation implementation plan that kind of started this discussion, right? And presumably in requesting their input into that implementation plan, they perceived that somehow we were going beyond the limits of our authority and intruding into theirs. And quite frankly, I think we were doing the right thing. We were soliciting input from them. We asked them for input, and as we did with CCOC. And we aren't at this point planning to move that document forward to the council. So in some ways, we're conforming to that approach as described by Scott in our very working methods. And I'm pretty happy about the result, other than the fact that the Transportation Commission didn't actually provide any feedback, at least to my knowledge, on the implementation plan or the draft implementation plan as we have developed it. So anyway, I think we're on the right track. We're doing what's needed, and I think we just need to continue recognizing that, as Tanya said, there's going to be differences between the commissions on how to approach an issue or how aggressive of a policy we need. Those are inevitable issues that will come to the fore as we move forward.
Okay. Is there any other commentary, Tanya?
Yeah, just I was in this coordination question, I was thinking that it was something else. And so I just wanted to support this idea that we should be coordinating with them. As Bob said, I don't think that this is too big of an ask. Where it's going to get tricky is in places that involve transportation, but are not solely transportation. And that's where we're going to have to figure out what that step looks like. I think that's where it could get tricky. But for anything that's straight transportation, I think this should be pretty easy. And we can head the other one off by doing our communication really well. Reaching out to them early on and figuring out what's the approach that's going to work the best if it's a multi-issue step that we're trying to take.
Stu?
Yeah, I agree with most of what's been said, but I think the last thing I would like to add on is that, what we want to avoid for sure is having two commissions giving disparate messages to council. I think that would be the worst case scenario here. So be recognizing that almost every CPC issue has overlap with someone else. I think it'd be good to coordinate with whoever that someone else is and make sure we're on the same page. Because having commissions not agree with each other has happened before, and it doesn't end well.
Is there a format for collaboration between commissions in that regard, or how would that occur?
If
I'm sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just say typically official communications between commissions have to go through staff liaison. But if you're just reaching out to somebody who's on another commission to talk about a project that we're getting going, that's different. So you can just connect with them. But when the commissions start to formally act together, then we need to be a little more formal about it.
I'm thinking in this instance where, Gary did the lead on this, and how could we have kind of gone about that differently, or would it have just been kind of passing this work up the ladder to the Transportation Commission for their review and buy-in, or edit, or how could that have occurred differently?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things about increasing the collaborations is can increase the timeline, right? Especially because we have to wait for meetings, for approvals and things like that. So probably having more lead time, having more opportunity to talk about it and less deadline, I think would be helpful. But that's not always possible. So I think that the 20 is plenty was a good model for how to get something going.
So Gary, I think I saw you raise your hand again.
Yeah, I was going to say that the timeline that we established as a commission for responses from both the CCOC and the Transportation Commission, I think not only were reasonable, but adequate, in that they did have I think the Transportation Commission had 2 meetings to discuss this and their response. So I think, again, I'm not sure that we can read too much into this document other than the fact that we need to maintain a commitment to involving other commissions in our work, because ultimately we need to build a broad collaboration among many disparate groups in order to move forward with this issue of climate change.
Yeah, I think one other thing that might help is if we are sending a document over, that we also send an emissary to speak to it at the meeting. That might help to clarify the intention and anything we left out.
I completely agree with that, Stu. I think if Gary had an opportunity to speak to the document with the Transportation Commission, which I don't believe that you did, it would have worked out better.
Clearly, the commissions are responsible for their own agenda and inviting people. I admit that I didn't make an explicit initiative to ask to be included on the commission's agenda, and could have, but did not.
Right, but
Well, I
this
think-
is the type of thing that I'm hoping this next Monday meeting is going to address, because I think that sets the precedent for the more informal types of collaboration that I think we all would agree is more efficient than the formal channels through staff and all that.
I think the last thing I would add to that, next time we decide to formally send something to another commission, we should at the same time identify somebody to go and speak to it at the next meeting. And when I send that to the liaison for that commission, I can request, a few minutes on their agenda.
Right, we tried to get the notion of reports from representatives of other commissions to fulfill that role, but perhaps it would be better to have just a bit more process to make sure it happens.
Yeah, and I don't think other commissions have that standing on their agenda necessarily. So, where we invite people to just show up, most places don't. So,
Okay. Bob?
I'm just realizing that I volunteered to take the action items. Was it for this meeting or this next meeting, September 9th, I believe?
Yeah, no, Ray is doing it tonight.
Great. I had that sinking feeling.
You'll see your name for September on the action items, Bob.
Okay, so I think I have a good feeling for how the commission feels about all this and can represent it properly on Monday. Thank you. Let's move on to rethinking streets, Gary.
There's really not anything for the commission to do. Stu did some investigation on the Ashland Municipal Code and found that as a commission, we don't have the authority to sponsor an event such as the one that's coming up, that's sponsored or that's co-hosted by the Ashland Climate Project and Ashland Bicycle Advocates Group. So I think this one we can just move on. But I would encourage you all to participate. I think it's a great opportunity to gain some insights into what I perceive as our future, or hopefully our future.
I'm not sure what sponsorship means, but could we say that the CPC supports the goals of this, whatever it is? I mean, what are the limits to our taking a public position?
Stu?
I don't think you can. I think council is responsible for all stances that are taken by the city.
I think, with our experience with the comments on the administrative rules and on this topic, it's clear that our commission authority flows through the council in virtually everything and anything that we might consider doing. Which makes sense, right? We aren't elected officials. We don't have the power of the electorate behind us. We're appointed. We serve at the council's pleasure.
And we make
Makes sense.
recommendations to the council.
Precisely.
Okay, well, so my understanding is that the commission could decide to request the council's sponsor, but then that adds in another layer of overhead and time delay and all that stuff.
Not going to happen.
Well, not for this one, clearly not. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If a similar situation arises and there is the time for it and it makes sense to ask the council to do it, we shouldn't assume it can't happen. It could be put forward.
Thank you for your consideration of this item, though. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to legislative session review. Jeff?
Okay, I'm going to take 4 or 5 minutes to very, very quickly run through some of the highlights, and then some of you I know have other perspectives and maybe know something that I don't. So I'm pulling most of this from the Department of Energy's legislative report. So this was a pretty significant year, I think, in terms of climate change legislation. HB 2021 was the 100% clean energy standard. So it sets targets for investor-owned utilities, 80% clean energy by 2030, 100% 2040. It restricts new fossil fuel infrastructure, which basically means no new natural gas power plants. And what's I think really relevant to Ashland is there's a new $50 million community resilient renewables investment fund. So that should be a primary target for Ashland as we move into the next year to figure out how we can take advantage of that, perhaps for the 1 megawatt solar power project at the airport, something like that. So that's a very should be a high priority for us to evaluate. HB 2062 sets energy efficiency standards for consumer products. So that's things like dishwashers, fans, water heaters, and so on. So it's moving the ball forward on the consumer section. HB 2165, transportation electrification. So it allows some of the investor-owned utilities to recover money spent on electrification investments. And it also, I think for Ashland, it's important, it refreshes the clean vehicle rebate program, which was set to expire. And I'm sure Stu knows a lot about that. Also, the several others that passed, HB 2180, EV ready building codes. So it targets larger commercial and residential buildings. So residential like 5+ units. It mandates 20% of the parking be electrically ready for vehicles. And then it also states that municipalities may exceed that target. So again, that's something that the Building Codes and Planning Division could take advantage of. HB 2475 is called energy affordability. So in PUC rulemaking, they can differentiate among their customers to give low income and underprivileged customers lower rates. HB 2842 is called healthy homes. So there's grants there for energy efficiency improvements in low income homes. SB 762 is the wildfire response one that we talked about earlier that requires electric utilities to have a plan. There were a bunch of things that did not pass. HB 2398 reach code for local jurisdictions would have allowed local jurisdictions to make reach codes mandatory. Unfortunately, that did not pass. Others in energy conservation and land use planning, climate justice in land use planning, and utility energy efficiency, those things did not pass. There was a giant omnibus energy bill, HB 3180, clean energy standards, and it was probably just too big and too ambitious. It did not pass. Other things that did not pass the legislature, renewable biofuels, net metering limits on solar, fugitive methane study and changes in investor-owned utility regulation as it pertains to resiliency and local renewables. And the reason I mentioned some of these is a lot of these things tend to come back in the future as the advocacy groups and the legislators that sponsor them kind of fine tune it and bring something back that is more likely to pass in a future session. So I think, overall, there was some significant progress and some things that the city of Ashland can take advantage of, especially in grants. That's all.
Okay, so not seeing any questions or further comments or anything like that. Thank you, Joe. I think we're ready to, oh, sorry. Ray?
Yeah, so I guess, will there be any follow-ups needed from the city of Ashland on any of these bills? I don't know, Stu, if any of them are in your headlights, such as, that those grants available in HB 2021 or.
Yeah, a lot of those programs haven't been stood up yet, so we'll stay tuned and watch for that.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. So I think we're ready to move on to the update. I'd like to outline what I'm hoping to accomplish tonight. And then we'll see what the commission decides to do. The first thing I'd like to do is to go through and have any changes that the commission wants to make to the document. And then I think we should, there's likely to be changes, and there certainly needs to be a slide deck prepared for the presentation on September 7th, which is just before our next meeting. And so I propose that the chair, vice chair, and up to 2 other people be appointed to do that work. And then I thought we'd go through the list of goals that's in, I believe, Appendix 1, and have an up or down. Are we actually going to go after this particular goal or not? And then if there's time available, to talk about what the next steps are on these specific initiatives and projects. I hope to use that conversation to update the look ahead that I sent out earlier, but I did not repeat into the packet. So those are the 4 things I'd like to do. And so I'd like to start with proposed changes.
Are you opening the floor then?
I am.
Okay. Okay.
Ready to propose changes.
With respect to some of the public input we got from Lori, I like the page 2 and in terms of highlighting that we are not currently meeting our goals. I'm wondering if we should put something in bold, or how do we emphasize that a little more, that we're may have increased our emissions rather than reduce them. Because I remember when Stu gave his report to the commission, I don't think there were really many questions asked, because obviously they were in the middle of the budget items and other things. But I think this is a chance for us to emphasize that again. And one other thing here, I have several, but one other I'll mention right now is I think in terms of our action items, anything we think we're going to need in this biennium or the next, maybe everything's in the next at this point, if you haven't already asked for it, what funding we might need, such as for a greenhouse gas inventory. If we have some idea of what that might be or when we think we want that, just so it gets out there.
Yeah, so an inventory is not terribly expensive, and in fact, I update them mostly every year. So a lot of the groundwork has been done, but it is nice to bring somebody in to do a more comprehensive assessment, especially if people want to look at things like scope 3 emissions and consumption and stuff like that. That goes way beyond mitigation, from fuel sources and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a small dollar amount. I think if we are concerned that asking for money is going to look bad or hurt us in some way, we could probably strip that out. But it's also good to identify future needs.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably bigger planning efforts afoot that will cost more than just doing the inventory, but I'm not sure what those would be and when exactly.
Well, we also want to do a natural gas inventory, so I don't know what help or money we might need for that.
So when you say natural gas inventory, besides consumption, is there something that you're thinking of?
This is just for the residential and commercial use in Ashland, right?
We've got pretty good data on that already by way of our franchise agreement. So
Okay,
that's one thing. So long as we have the franchise agreement, we do get good data in aggregate for the different customer classes that use gas. We just don't have, address level data. So, and all of that natural gas consumption, that's actually some of our best data. Electric use and natural gas use is the most solid data we have in our inventory. We get that regularly, and that was included in the last couple of reports to council that I did. So I would say there is room to bring in a consultant, but also we have some of that data in-house already, at least with inventories. Where we might spend more money on an or on a study would be like a revised vulnerability or resilience assessment. That could take more effort and cash.
as part of the adaptability project.
Yeah.
Okay.
To flesh out the adaptation goals.
Hey, Jen Ray?
A couple minor ones. You mentioned the formal planning you list as attachment 1, but then later it shows up in appendix 2. So maybe just correct that.
Okay.
And then when we get to the goals, I know you had some question mark there, so we could comment on that
Yeah, I'd like to leave that
for
for
work
later.
items.
Okay, I think Bob and then Gary.
Thanks, thanks, Rick. Yeah, like Ray,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but I don't think we've really addressed Ray's comment. And I'm afraid that if we continue each of us to give our own individual comments, that we'll lose the points that were made early on. And I wonder if maybe we should come back to discuss Ray's observation about our lack of progress on addressing climate change.
Yeah, I think Bob might actually be about to address that.
Okay, great.
yeah. I mean, just so happens, I think I agree with you, Gary, that's a good process. In this particular case, I was going to follow right behind Ray and say I had exactly the same feeling. And what I did is,
I think we should try to follow that process.
Yeah.
If there's commentary and discussion about a specific point, we should do it at the time rather than waiting for later. Now go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so Ray and I did not collaborate on this. We have not talked to each other. We've not been in the same room or anything like that. But I had the same feeling, and my feeling is that there's a way to kind of bring the attention right up front by really using the executive summary in a fuller way. And I appreciate that the executive summary is trying to be really short and punchy, but I think it actually one alternative that could be very useful is to lay out for some of the council members who aren't really aware in as much depth as some of the older or some of the more long-standing council members, and then also for the staff or for the community members who might actually read this, or that we give more of the background and then kind of go through and just lay out 3 basic messages. So I drafted something that I sent to Rick and Jeff and Stu, but unfortunately I didn't draft it soon enough to be able to get it circulated to this commission for discussion before deadline or whatever that deadline was. Like, you know, it wasn't in the packet because I wrote it after reading the packet. So I don't know. I could read it, or if there's a way of sharing it on the screen so people can see it. I don't know what you'd would like to do, but it basically does do just what I just described. There's a very brief background on what the SEEP is and how it came about. Very brief, just a paragraph, and then really comes to a comment that, you know, we're not meeting our goals, and kind of goes into that a little bit and really focuses on fossil gas and then the other points that two other points that Stu made in his report. So I don't know. I just kind of summarized it as quickly as I can, but I could actually read it if you'd like, or whatever process you prefer.
Yeah, well, Stu, if we had the technical capability to share Bob's screen, we can put it up. I think that would be best, because it's really hard with the length that it is for everybody to paint it when it's read.
Yeah, so Stu, you would need to either make me a co-host, or you could actually share it because you have a copy.
Well, I can just make you co-host. That's easier.
And then Rick, what I suggest is, you know, I could just read it while people can read it themselves, or do you want people to have just time to read it on their own without me, you know, giving my monotone?
Well, I've already read it, so it doesn't really matter to me.
No, I know. I mean, for the
why don't
committee.
you-
For the
Why don't
commission.
you go ahead and put it up?
You go ahead and share your screen and then just read it. I think that would be the best.
All right, I will.
That way we'll have it actually read into the meeting recording.
Is that it? Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, it's called executive summary, and I'm going to read it into the record.
Hey, Bob.
Ashland's-
Bob, could I just make a preface, a comment in general? This, from my perspective, this process works pretty good. We put a more or less complete document out there. Bob reads it, digests it, and then comes back with a proposal that I certainly support. But this is a good way of the commission to put together something that we all can agree on.
Great. Yeah, no, exactly. This is how this is the only way we can deliberate is by doing this sort of thing. Okay, so I'll read it. The Ashland City Council approved the Climate and Energy Action Plan in March 2017, and in September of that year embedded it into the Ashland Municipal Code. The SEEP is subdivided into 6 focus areas and 83 priority actions. In 2019, the City Council established a Climate Policy Commission to oversee the implementation of the SEEP and recommend updates to the plan as necessary to, quote, incorporate best available science and practices to achieve the City of Ashland's climate-related goals and targets, unquote. The CPC has 8 representatives from the community, plus a staff and council liaison. 2 positions are currently vacant, as are 2 student representative positions from either SOU or ASD. The Commission's charter includes mandates to monitor progress on climate-related goals and targets, recommend changes in city ordinances and practices to facilitate or incentivize residents and businesses to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and address social, economic, and environmental equity and goals. The details of the CPC's charter can be found at, there's a link to code. The code requirements for the city's climate response can be found at another link to the codes. And I didn't check these links. These are the links that were in some of the background section. The purpose of this report is to meet the requirements set forth in AMC Chapter 940.040C4 and serve as the CPC's annual report to the Ashland City Council. The CPC will recommend, as part of the fiscal 2023-2025 city budget, funding for a comprehensive SEEP update, including an updated emission inventory. In consultation with city staff, the CPC has determined that a comprehensive update of this 2017 SEEP is not needed at this time. But that does not mean all is well. The city's climate and energy analyst, Stu Green, reported to the council on May 4th, 2021, that Ashland is falling behind on its goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In particular, there's been a significant increase in natural gas connections and consumption since 2015. Quote unquote, natural gas is a fossil fuel that when released into the atmosphere has 86 times more global warming potential than carbon dioxide over 20 years. Achieving Ashland's greenhouse gas mitigation goal will require continued attention to reducing transportation emissions and a much greater focus on reducing fossil gas emissions. Two other points from Stu Green's last SEEP project update we bear emphasizing. First, Ashland's climatic conditions have deteriorated since the council approved the SEEP in March 2017. We endured prolonged smoke from wildfires in the summers of 2017 and 2018 that threatened our residents' health and stressed our local economy. With diminished winter snowpack in Southern Oregon, Jackson County declared drought emergency conditions in 2020 and 2021. That fact and prolonged high air temperatures have dramatically increased fire and health risks. So while we redouble our efforts to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as called for in the SEEP and corresponding city ordinance, we also need urgently to address the impacts of climate change we are already experiencing. Second, the burden of climate impacts falls most heavily on Ashland's low and medium income residents who lack resources to protect themselves. Equitable climate action demands a special emphasis on assisting these residents by maximizing current programs, opportunities, and resources available to them. In light of this situation of patchy progress implementing the SEEP, greater urgency to act to reduce Ashland's greenhouse gas emissions and improve our community's resilience at the same time, and resource constraints to carry out the Commission's work, the CPC decided to prioritize efforts on five initiatives. 1, input to the city's formal planning processes. 2, clean buildings. 3, the path off natural, parenthetically, fossil gas. Energy efficient transportation, and 5, sustainable electricity. We'll also work on 2 more limited projects to set the stage for further work next year. A, review the 2016 vulnerability assessment and the current adaptation element of the SEEP to create an outline of the issues that need to be addressed by the city and community. And B, work with parks and recreation and commercial landscape companies to explore phasing out the use of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment in residential neighborhoods. I'm going to stop. Should I? Well, I can't stop sharing because then you can't see it. And in fact, I should stop moving it.
I didn't think we had data on consumption. I thought originally it said something like it may have gone up, but we don't have the data to support it. So I don't know if I would make that statement.
You mean natural gas consumption? We do have it, I believe.
Okay. I thought you said natural gas and consumption, but it's natural gas consumption.
Let me see where, what paragraph? Natural gas is.
Consumption. So that's why it doesn't say natural gas consumption.
Connections and gas. Okay, yes. Okay. So that needs to be clarified. Thank you. Yeah, we'll have to, so action item.
Yeah, I could.
For what it's worth, we do have data showing consumption has increased dramatically. We just don't have a way to parse that out to Ashland specifically.
Yeah, okay.
But
you didn't mean consumption there. Yeah,
I meant natural gas consumption.
All right.
I tried to take language that was already existing, and I think I took language from Stu's executive summary for this.
Gary, I can't hear you if you're speaking.
How did you know that? Anyway, that same paragraph, the last sentence, I would personally prefer that sentence to be structured in a way that emphasizes that we need to reduce both the transportation and the fossil gas emissions, both as urgent priorities. As it reads now, it seems to be that fossil gas needs greater focus, but I think the same is true of transportation emissions.
Yeah, point taken. So my plan is to review this recording and in collaboration with the 3 other folks and respond to the comments appropriately.
So let me also say that my methodology here was, as I said, I tried to take language that already existed. I believe that this is a direct quote from Stu's executive summary. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be stronger on it. And I think that actually is exactly what we maybe should do. So I would agree with that comment.
The other thing, and this kind of hurts us all to have to say, but I think part of the responsibility of where we're, let me start again. Part of the responsibility for our lack of progress stems from our own inaction. I think we've brought two things before the council since we began. One was the emergency ordinance. The second was the comments on the climate-friendly rulemaking. We also asked them to endorse House Bill, now I'm blanking on the number, but those were the three things that we advanced to the council. My expectation when I joined the CPC was that we would be bringing things to council at a rate that would overwhelm them, quite frankly, and I don't think we've overwhelmed anyone. So in terms of responding to Lori's comments, I think we need to shoulder some of that burden for our city's lack of progress.
Are you proposing changing this document in some way? I like to stay focused on the document right now. I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's what we have on the table right now.
Yeah, and I think that I am focused on the document, but I don't have any language in mind to specifically integrate that comment. But I think that needs to be a part of the executive summary so that, again, we're putting the council, we're informing the council that we feel like they have struggled with this issue as we have, and we aren't satisfied with our progress. Anyway, I don't expect to try to wordsmith that this afternoon, but I think that is a point that we should also include in this executive summary.
Yeah, well, I think there's probably a positive way of putting that.
Absolutely. Yep,
okay.
Don't disagree.
Okay, Bob and then Tanya.
Yeah, I disagree with Gary's comment only to the extent that he seems to suggest that the only action that the CPC, the only valid action of the CPC is when it puts something before the city council. And I don't think that's true at all. I think there's a lot of things that the CPC does to provide expertise and advice and support to the city. And we talked earlier today about Chris's participation in the housing assessment. So all of the formal planning things. I think, Stu's work for the home energy retrofit program. I think there are a lot of things that fall short of the CPC actually presenting something to council as like a policy. And I think it would be unfortunate to give the impression that action involves only passing ordinances or resolutions. So yeah, I think actually, but I do take Gary's point that maybe there needs to be more of a list of what we've done. I thought there was a fairly good list in the body, not in the executive summary. But so maybe there needs to be something also in the executive summary about the things that the CPC spent its time on. We could have a conversation about how we prioritized our work, and maybe it was not a priority or shouldn't have been a priority for us to work on home energy retrofits, or because that wasn't going to result immediately in a council resolution or whatever. I don't mean to just pulling an example, but I don't think that it's necessarily the case that not having resolutions means inaction.
Tanya?
First, thank you, Bob, for putting this together. I think that it's really important that the executive summary address these issues and really bring home that we're not hitting our targets. Two suggestions. One is that I think it would be good to reference the IPCC special, the warning about that we have a timeline, because I'm not sure that timeline is well understood by all of the people who will read this. And so the reason for the major push is that we actually have a deadline. We have a threshold we can't cross. And then what I would say, I wouldn't be keen to lay any sort of blame anywhere. I think it's easy to forget that this commission was not even able to meet for 6 months last year. And the plan didn't have an implementation plan. We had to kind of develop one. Stu has been doing a great job. It's a huge task. And we've had dual emergencies going on that have impacted not only the council, but also staff and also all of us. So I wouldn't necessarily go anywhere near that conversation. I don't think it's helpful, but I do think that what we should be saying in here is, because of this timeline, because we need to put so much energy into this, like kind of expect to be seeing us, right? I mean, we are going to be moving aggressively and bringing forward, things that can really move the dial. And just kind of expect it, right? This is kind of the heads up that they'll be seeing a lot more of this commission as appropriate, and a lot more sort of outward action moving forward. Something along that line, so that when this commission does need to bring things forward, it'd be easier to get it on the calendar and the agenda.
Yeah, so what I had in mind is towards the end, where we list the 5 initiatives and the 2 projects, that we put a sentence basically to the effect of what Tanya just said. That these things are going to be brought to council this year. I think Jeff was next, and then Ray.
Well, I'll mention Ray. So the principal authors of this document, part of the intent was to be forward-looking. So hopefully that's reflected here. And then an early comment from Ray was that there were goals kind of interleaved in this document, but he suggested that we kind of pull those out. And so we did that in Appendix 1 to try to, address that issue of, okay, maybe we weren't as organized in the past as we could have been, but moving forward, we're going to have a clear set of goals that we're working toward.
Yeah, Jeff, I agree. Getting back to Gary's comment, let's see how we do with our goals over next year, which ones we achieve and we don't. I think it's good that we continue to highlight the problem and what our plans are to address it and move forward with that. The other thing is, at the bottom of this executive summary, you list the 5 initiatives sort of in a sentence mode. I kind of like them in the bulleted list that we originally had, because that's the way they show up later in the document. And I don't think they stand out as good here in the paragraph. That's just my feeling. So you can decide which way to go. And oh yeah, and another thing we're going to ask money for in the next biennium is the climate study for the water. Scott's already put that in, but might be good to mention it again, so that when it comes back with this capital plan, that they say, oh yeah, right, this thing again.
Stu?
One thing I wanted to mention, Bob, I think you read 83 actions. It says it's correct as it's written, 63. And then the other point I wanted to mention is, I don't know how much it bears putting in here, but the message to council has been the same for the last 3 annual reports that we're falling behind. So it's not just the last report, if that matters, that distinction. That's all.
Yeah.
One other thing, Gary, you provided some rather pointed input on an earlier draft. So how did we do in incorporating your comments in your material? Are you okay with it at this point?
Let me respond to that after we get through with Bob's paragraph here. I would say that, Bob, you're onto something. I'd be happy to let the principal authors of the document refine this paragraph as they, or this section as they see appropriate, and let's do it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that Bob's proposal will be largely adopted, which will mean replacing the existing executive summary and introduction with this material as modified. And then the document will pick back up at the background. Is that correct? Okay.
There might be some overlap with the background too, so I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just have to sort that out.
Yeah, okay.
At first blush, I think it's actually relatively distinct, but we'll figure it out. Okay, so then I think moving on to, sorry, Bob, go ahead. Can't hear you.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm sorry. Along the lines that Tanya, mentioned about the IPCC, which I think is an excellent point. She's also, talked about the general fund discussion, but maybe the comment that SOCAN Ashland Action Project made in the public forum, maybe pulling some of that that sentiment, and that's where Ray started us off at actually. And I didn't pick it up in here because I hadn't seen that when I drafted this. But there may be something to weave into there as well about the importance of prioritizing climate in the city's overall budget deliberations. Climate general fund and any fund really. It's both mitigation and resilience. It's all got to be done. I think reiterating that is really important. Here. Maybe you're going to have a PowerPoint presentation as well, so there's lots of other places to do it. But I don't think it hurts to stay in lots of places. I think it's a good point, and thanks, Ray, for picking that up.
Sure, and I think we have an action item as far as the carbon note that might address some of that. Maybe Jeff can talk when we get to that.
Okay, so I'm not hearing objection to my summary of how we're going to deal with Bob's proposal. There's just been more refinement. So I'm going to assume that that's the direction that we're headed. As long as there's consensus on that, I don't see any need for a formal vote. So now I'd like to move on to the question that Jeff posed to Gary.
I'm really delighted. I am, other than a few edits and some specific points, I'm really happy with what's materialized out of your efforts. Thank you for your effort and all the time that you've spent. I'm delighted, but I would like to return to Ray's comment about budget issues and requesting money. As I read the document, we're anticipating that in the next biennium, we're going to solicit or ask for funds from the council and budget committee to update the SEEP. And while at this juncture, we don't know what that really might entail, I think that's a place mark for us to, be able to come back to in the future to say, now's the time. So I do think we're, kind of putting our oar in the water in terms of trying to get additional funding in the future.
Yeah, so my assumption has been that we're going to need roughly the level of funding that originally generated the seat, perhaps not quite that much, but it's the same sort of outreach and public meetings, and to rewrite such a large document, I don't think is actually appropriate for volunteer commissioners to be trying to do that. And so we need consulting help to actually write the document. So that's my assumption. And so if anybody has a different set of assumptions, please say so.
There's a couple hands up.
Sorry, Bob.
Yeah,
I had my own turn off.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have a different set of assumptions, but I just wanted to comment that this is exactly fitting into, I think, the city council's prioritization of the general fund. And, my guess is that funding a consultant for the SEEP would come out of the general fund, wouldn't necessarily come out of the electric fund. But I don't know, that's really for somebody else to figure out. Assuming that some money would come out of the general fund, there may be needs for the general fund, getting that sort of thing, socialized early might be important. I don't know how Tanya feels that might play at this point, bringing into the conversation, or whether there are other things that we'd needs from the general fund that we want to bring into the conversation. But I think there's got to be a certain tactical consideration about how to play that.
Yeah, Tanya.
I think it is a tough place to be, because we know that we have to make some adjustments, probably to service levels, maybe to existing programs, in order to be able to meet our service requirements with the funding that we have available. We're in a constant vice situation at the city. That being said, I think it's also helpful to have a very honest conversation about what is needed. The fact that we have limited resources doesn't change what is needed to meet our climate goals. It's the same thing with wildfire safety. Those needs are increasing while our resources are decreasing, and that's the reality, and we should have it on the table. One of the things I didn't mention earlier, but it's probably pertinent to this conversation, is that we did also have a conversation at the council during the last study session about how a larger strategic planning process will work with this general fund conversation, because we don't really have a strategic plan at the moment for the city of Ashland. And what the council has decided is that it will go through this general fund conversation first, and then look to pick up that larger community visioning process after it's addressed these general fund questions. So I think it's useful to remind the council that more resources are needed for climate now, even though we're talking about this biennium right now with the decisions we're making. It's important to let them know that more resources are going to be needed. And then the bigger push is, I think, in that strategic planning process, which should happen between now and the beginning of the next biennium.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's going to be a very difficult conversation, because we really do need the resources to respond appropriately, and all the communities in the world need to respond appropriately, even if that means we have to give up things that we're used to having. And that makes it a very difficult conversation. Bob? No, it was Ray. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're next to each other on my screen.
Just two things. Updating the SEEP, I think we need to discuss what that is. It's okay to put it in there. It's more of a generic at this point, because what's the goal of updating it? Are we trying to update for sections we didn't have time to adequately address the first time? I don't really see the need to go through everything and update it, because we already know enough to do. But there are sections we could probably improve. The other thing is in funding. I think we put out what we need, and who knows if the funding will come solely from the city. We don't know in the future what more money might go into climate change action items that we may get from the state or federal government to do.
Gary?
I think Stu had some comment.
Yeah, I did. Just a short one though. To my understanding, there's never been an expense from the general fund to pay for a big planning effort like the SEEP, maybe in 20 years or so. So that was a very unusual event. If we do that again, why update the SEEP? That's a good question. The reason maybe because it's in the ordinance that we need to review it and keep it current, but functionally, does it need to be updated? That's to be determined, I think. Also, it may be possible to do some sort of funding from the enterprise funds, so long as everybody's chipping in and the part that's chipped in is reflecting the ratepayer interests. I don't think the electric fund is going to be footing the bill for a comprehensive climate plan because that's not going to serve the ratepayers. So just something to think about. The other thing I was going to say is perhaps putting a leader in there to make sure that the strategic plan for council does include a strong climate element. I think that would be an appropriate thing to ask for right now. And if we can identify that there are certain funding needs and even better, put a number to it, great. I agree that we don't need to know exactly where that's going to come from. But if we can at least put it out there now, we can refer back and say, hey, look, we told you that this was going to come. So I think that's all for right now.
So my comment was that I anticipate that not this year, but next year, we'll develop a SEEP update work program that we can potentially at least cost out and get a better understanding of, as Ray was saying, what the scope of that update is and get a pretty good understanding of what we need a consultant to actually do. So that's in our future, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we should deep end on that tonight.
No.
Bob, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to echo just to give support to Stu. I don't need to belabor, but I think really highlighting at every opportunity the fact that the city's strategic plan needs to reflect the importance of climate to the city, the climate changes that we're already seeing, and also the part that our city has committed to do to reduce our emissions. So, just needs to make that sure it gets in the strategic plan every opportunity.
Yep. Tanya?
Yes, I wonder if one of the goals for this upcoming year shouldn't be to identify a budget for the implementation efforts that we think we need coming into the next formal budgeting process. Should we have identified what do we really think it's going to take financially to meet this challenge? Would that be of use?
I certainly agree with that. Does everybody agree with putting that into our goal section?
Yeah.
I would just say that it seems like I think we've all agreed that we've got a lot on our plate this year, but I think next year is when we need to prepare for the budget, and that would logically be a part of next year's work program. I don't mean to postpone it, but just looking at what we can do, I think not only will our work this year help to inform what needs to be done, but I think also next year would serve to be a timely point in the process to be giving the council input on our budget needs. So just a question of timing.
I agree. That makes sense to me. Okay, so we kind of took a detour there, which is very useful. At this point, I want to be sure we've captured any detailed comments that people have all the way through page 10, which is just to the end of the document before the appendices. So if there's any detailed comment that you have, let's do that.
So is it my turn?
It can be. I can't see you now, so.
Okay, well, I'm trying to look at my notes, and on page 5 under clean buildings, my comment was on our efforts in terms of fuel switching from natural gas to electricity. And I know that we do allow some fuel switching with our incentive programs, but I don't really believe at this juncture that that's a programmatic objective. And I'm really want to know whether we are in fact encouraging fuel switching with what we're doing now. My own personal experience is that that was an ancillary benefit of a different incentive for a different purpose, but it did have that effect of allowing me to fuel switch. But is that really a programmatic objective at this point? Stu, I guess that's to you.
Yeah, you know, I try to keep the focus not on particular fuels, but on emissions and carbon and adaptation. So my preference is to always talk about emissions reduction through electrification, because that's currently the best pathway we have to reduce emissions. There may be another pathway coming down the road. We don't know. I'm not personally opposed to calling it fuel switching, but I think it puts us on a little bit more slippery slope. Utilities are not supposed to interfere with each other. And, you know, if we focus on the emissions part of it, I think that leaves it very clear what we're trying to do.
The other point that I had in that same paragraph is it alludes to two factors determining the pace of conversion. One is building codes, and the document says the economics of upgrading older structures. It seems to me that the replacement of at the end of useful life of appliances and heating systems is an equally important factor in our progress. In fact, that may be more important than whether buildings are upgraded, just in terms of the scale of that of those two endeavors.
Well, I think I might have a slightly different viewpoint on that. I know that replacing it at end of life is the current accepted wisdom. But when I start doing back of the envelope calculations, we're just not going to get there that way.
Right.
We need to stand up programs that methodically go through and just get rid of natural gas. Not only because of the pace, but also from an equity point of view. If you leave it to the folks that can afford to do this, it leaves the wrong people behind to pay for what's still left. And so my current belief is that to do this equitably, you actually do need to basically just march through the building stock and take care of it all.
That's a bit different issue than what I'm raising, I guess, and that what the document states is there are, you know, two principal ways to deal with this. And your comment is really about the speed with which we replace those existing natural gas or fossil gas powered equipment. And the fact of the matter is many of them, I don't think, are accomplished by a rebuilding or reconstruction of a building, but rather just an isolated replacement. I think more to the point in terms of this document, to the degree we can be as succinct as you were in your response, that's the way the document needs to read, is that we need to replace these existing appliances, weatherize the existing housing stock and other residential buildings as soon as possible, as urgently as we can. And that may be a better point to raise than how we might go about that.
Okay, I think I understand the point, Stu.
Yeah, just a little add-on to that. And it's mentioned in the document already, but the impact on low and moderate income folks, I think it bears repeating, I think, that this is an equity issue. And if we don't have a coordinated plan, we're going to leave behind a lot of the city. And we don't want to do that. So I think folks will resonate with that message. It's probably worth restating at least twice.
Okay, so Gary, did you have more detailed comments further on? Because I don't want to do this. I'd rather go through people rather than the document because it's
okay.
Using otherwise.
I do have several other comments. For instance, on page 7 of 16, we talk about the split incentive problem. I would prefer that the document speak with a sentence to describe what that is rather than using jargon.
Okay.
And finally, on the next page, on 8 of 18, we talk in the section about clean buildings, suggest that we're going to look at density bonuses. And I would prefer that that section focus on areas in the city where we in fact want to concentrate development, which is in the transit triangle downtown and at the Croman Mill site, all of which are identified as transit-oriented developments, rather than having it more general. Just, you know, again, I'm kind of taken by the fact that this document has more policy and more direction than we've tried to formulate over the past year. And we're giving, you know, roughly 2 meetings to trying to formulate this. And I don't, you know, again, I'm happy with the document. I'm just, you know, there's a lot of things that may warrant refinement, and we just need to acknowledge that, I guess, at this point. The other, I guess I'll tie it up with one other specific comment on page 8 of 16 again.
Before you move on, I want to be sure you understood the previous comment. When you referred to those 2 specific areas in the city, are you saying you want the document to do that? Or did you want to say something quite a little bit different than that?
Well, it refers to residential projects generically. And I wouldn't see, for instance, any density bonuses being given in the single family residential area for greenhouse gas emission reductions. But that isn't what this suggests. And what I would prefer is to focus where we really want development bonuses to occur, and that is, in my estimation, in those specific areas in the city where we've targeted multi-use, mixed use, you know, higher density development. So again, it's kind of wordsmithing in a way, but it is really important in terms of how we approach the topic.
Yeah, no, I understood that part, but then you use both general descriptions of the appropriate areas.
Right.
And then you also used 2 specific, you know, the triangle part and the Cronin Mill part. And do you want us to mention those 2 specific areas?
I really, you know, my preference would be is that we would remove reference to residential projects generally and substitute that a phrase that basically emphasizes development in mixed use developments, including the transit triangle downtown and Croman Mill site.
Okay, so both.
That would, well, 3 areas. That would be my preference.
Replace the general concept with the specific and cite the specific areas.
That would be my preference.
Okay, got it. Stu?
Well, I just want to make sure, I'm not the expert on the density bonus, but I do have it on my list as something that we need to look at down the road. And it's, you know, something that is revisited by council occasionally. But to my understanding, it only applies to, you know, subdivision level stuff. So maybe I misheard what the comment was, but there's no way to apply the density bonus, to my knowledge, to single family situations that maybe I didn't understand. So I just want to put it out there that we have it on the radar. Never hurts to push on it. That's definitely a tool that we could develop, and it is very out of date. It needs to be revised, but it is pretty limited in how it can be applied. I'm not even sure if the density bonus is applicable to commercial properties or not. Chris, maybe you know about that.
Yeah, my understanding of it is it's not applicable to single family residence by any means, but it is, and it's more, my understanding of that is it's more in relationship to commercial and multi-family housing.
Yeah, or like a subdivision of single
Yes.
family homes. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, large
And-
scale and
Right.
in that regard.
So anyway, again, I would prefer that focus on areas where we know we want intense development.
Yeah, okay, I think I got the idea now. Thank you.
Okay, good. Now, the only other one that I will comment on at this juncture is, again, on that same page, the phrase, the second bullet under energy efficient transportation is missing the phrase each year between. So it would read, build, this is again from the implementation plan. We would include, so reconfigure, reconstruct 4 lane miles of existing higher volume roadways to include protected bike lanes each year between now and 2035.
Got it.
Okay. And I think I'm okay. Other than, I think on page 10 of 16, the last paragraph of adaptation, I think the reference to 2022, 23 should actually be 23, 24, which would be coincident with what we're hoping will be a SEEP update. I think that task of revising the adaptation element would logically be included as a part of the SEEP update, not something we do in advance of that.
Tanya?
The timing of that is assuming that it's a somewhat separate process, or at least elements of this are separate from a comprehensive SEEP update. In terms of what those next steps are, revisiting the vulnerability assessment is a primary element, but some of this work's already been done. And some of these vulnerabilities need to be addressed by existing programs at the city. They're not necessarily things that are going to be developed. Strategies are not necessarily going to be developed outside of those structures for some of these vulnerabilities. So this early step is really about revisiting that vulnerability assessment and identifying which of those vulnerabilities can be addressed within the current city structure, and which of those need to be addressed during the more comprehensive plan the following year. So that's the difference there. And maybe there's a way to write it in a way that makes that more clear.
I think I have been instructed what to do.
Okay.
Bob?
And so I don't know if it's my turn now to provide some of the more
sorry,
detailed
I
comments.
thought you were commenting on the current discussion. So I just
Well,
want
I am current commenting. I would like to comment on one of the things that Gary said, but that's it. But then I also have other things as well. So I don't know where you want.
no, if
I'm
you're
done.
germane to the current discussion, then go ahead. And-
Well, yes. So it's really Gary said something on page 8 of 16 with the bullets under the energy efficient transportation. The CPC will recommend the TSP update include, and there's several bullets and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. So my reaction to that was, are we actually saying at this point what we're going to recommend at that point? But then I think Gary said that we've already done that. We've done that in the past because we were preparing for the transportations. Is that something we've already approved as a commission? These are the recommendations, or is it something that we will recommend? Something Gary said suggested to me that we've actually already done it back a year ago when we were expecting the transportation system plan to go forward.
I would be happy to respond to that quandary of issues. Yes, that statement is embodied in the urban land use and transportation implementation plan.
Right. Okay.
We as a commission haven't in my estimation, gone through that, vetted it, done the things that ultimately would need to be done in order for it to serve as our, kind of flag of what our expectations are for the TSP, truthfully. But if we do expect the bicycle network to serve a functional role in the transportation system, we're going to need to build separated bikeways on the major street network. So it's really, in my mind at least, kind of a fait accompli. If we want a functional bicycle network, that's what we're going to need. And if we want it done by 2035, we're going to have to get on it. But to your point, that's not a part of the SEEP, obviously.
Well, and I think it's fair to say that the commission as a whole has not actually approved the document that you wrote, Gary. And so the word will is probably too strong.
Right. I think maybe there's a little bit too much detail there. Maybe we should make it a little bit more, all the rest of the points in this 2021, 2022 section are a little bit more general. I take your point that these are probably the things that we're all going to be considering, but that we should make it, a bit more general so that we don't, I don't know, it's not tying our hands, but doesn't look like there's nothing further to do.
Following proper process is what I'm getting out of your comment.
Right.
I agree. Yes, exactly. Okay, I have other small comments that I could also share at this point, or I can wait until.
Well, I think Gary said that he was done, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, let's see. Let's see where we go from the top here. I think. So there's some very small things, but I'd rather just send you some of the like editing things. Can I just send you that rather than actually take up commission time with that? There's a couple of typos and things like that. I don't think any take up time.
Typos you can just send in, but anything beyond that, I think we really need to have everybody be able to respond to it.
Okay, I'll send you typos, things like that. The things that I want to raise then are on page 7 of 16 under clean buildings. There's a reference to the home energy score, similar to that adopted by Portland. I'd rather, instead of Portland, I'd rather use the example of Milwaukee, which is a city that's our size, and that's what Stu and I were looking at. And in fact, we've gotten materials from them. I think that's really the more appropriate model for us. And then I think the third line of that same bullet, when a home is publicly advertised, they generally talk about publicly listed. It's kind of a, I think it's better to say listed. I've already talked about energy transportation. I'm a little, there's a reference on the sustainable electricity to the CPC on page 9 of 16. The CPC will also be working with Ashland's electric utility to evaluate the feasibility of a 1 megawatt solar project at the airport. I would prefer to be a little bit more agnostic on location of that. I know that there's discussions of that it could be at the airport, but there's pros and cons of that. And certainly in terms of resilience, it may not be the best location. And then I think recruitment, the CPC would welcome the city council's assistance. I think we should be a little bit stronger on that. The city CPC needs additional members, and it's not really the CPC's job to recruit. It's the mayor's job. The mayor appoints. So the mayor needs to do what the mayors do in order to get appropriate candidates or people to appoint. It just seems to be a little bit too soft for my taste. And I think small engines, the last thing is, it's small gasoline powered small engines. And several times there's reference to small engines. I think maybe it should be, well, I guess you're saying that an engine implies gasoline powered. Is that right?
Well, it implies fossil fuel. It's internal combustion engines. If it was electric, it'd be a motor.
Okay, great. Thank you, Engineer Barth. It's great. I learned something every time I'm with you, Rick. I learned something. So thank you. I'm done. I'm done.
I was,
Nice job, by the way. Nice job, guys. I said this in my comment yesterday when I sent the suggestions for the executive summary. I think you guys did a terrific job. So thank you.
given your remark about edits and the fact that you would like them only to be limited to spelling and other grammatical errors, I would prefer that we use fossil gas, not natural gas, in its entirety everywhere in the document.
After explaining it the first time, right?
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't disagree with that, but for the folks who aren't used to the lingo, it's easy for them to slip back into thinking it's gasoline. So do what you like, but just be aware that it sometimes garbles the message.
Okay, so the point's been raised, and I think that the team that does the final edits will have to think that through and make the right thing happen. Okay, so is there anybody else that has detailed comments they would like to provide? I assume you're done, Bob.
Done. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so is there anyone else? Stu?
I have a little thing. You know, a lot of the stuff that's talking about future work, CPC supporting staff, I don't know that we need to have all the details, and it doesn't have to be 100% correct, but the things I can identify that maybe, you know, I don't know if we want to leave in here. I'm looking specifically at page 7, the clean buildings bit. There's some suggested changes to the solar access code, and I'm not 100% certain that that piece of code is going to be the place where that would happen. Additionally, City of Ashland does not currently regulate any interior floor plan design. So I think putting that in there of habitable spaces on the south, while I support that idea, might freak people out, and it might not be possible anyway. So I think we need to decide whether we want to put it in there as an aspirational thing or not. Some of the other suggested changes to the solar ordinance, that might be a good place to put that. And additionally, there might be another place that planning would decide is more appropriate. That's not my expertise. But I think there's definitely a question about orienting the roof. Is what about existing lots? The solar access ordinance right now talks about subdivisions of land and how those need to be optimized to improve solar, but existing parcels, especially in historic districts and places like this, may not be possible to orient properly if it's a north-south, you know, skinny lot. So I don't want to put anything in here that might unduly, it might not be possible, right? So there are definitely some improvements we could make to that solar ordinance, but I don't know that we can be quite as strong with that language. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what Chris has to say about it.
Oh, yeah, Chris, if you have something to add.
You know, when we discuss that, I think in terms of planning staff and how we dealt with that, it was, I think, really the best kind of avenue we could approach that on in terms of, I feel like putting something across that we can likely anticipate approval on at this time. My only concern is the evolution of technologies. You know, as we obviously we can't be too far ahead on some of these issues, but I do feel like we're almost working with antiquated means and methods, even as it stands right now. I mean, and I know when I kind of discussed about the solar approach and actually utilizing LiDAR and other kind of 3D mapping data to really analyze that in real time and maybe focus more on where we're going to get the most benefit to gain ratio on those installation points. I think that's more where I would like to see us go, but at the same time, I feel like our hands are tied a little bit in just kind of working with the vernacular of our local departments. And in that regard, I feel like we've got the best kind of outline possible on this currently.
Well, but what I'm not sure what to do. What I'm hearing Stu say is that we might want to soften this rather than say this is what we're going to propose, and it's might be perceived as draconian in some quarters. And so what I'm wondering is whether softening that language in this particular document, and knowing full well that when we actually bring a policy to council, it might be more draconian, is something that you would support.
That's fine with me. I mean, I do feel like we're kind of dealing with kind of, you know, generalities to some degree here, and I think that helps. And as Bob mentioned too, I feel like it's important to not get kind of caught in the details right now on this, or alignment with any one body or reference in terms of the airport project. And I think we need to look at addressing universalities here in terms of the city of Ashland rather than specific groups or details, as you would. So I'm fine with that.
So Rick, I don't really have enough expertise in this area to do this. I'm hoping you do.
Oh yeah, no, I'm assuming we're going to do this jointly. Gary? I can't hear you, Gary.
Sorry. Coming back to Bob's point and to the dilemma that the solar access stuff kind of presents to us, maybe we should kind of more generalize many of the points that we've made here in terms of substantive changes, and just talk about exploring and coordinating with whether it's the Transportation Commission or the planning staff or what have you, really kind of back up and talk more about process rather than outcomes, because we can't go from where we're at today to a specific proposal without all that coordination and interaction work. So we're really describing a process that we hope to initiate in almost all these cases. We don't have the authority to do them otherwise.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. So if that's the consensus of the commission, I'm happy to that the team that does this work undertake that sort of generalization and reduction of specifics.
I agree.
Yeah, and that would apply equally to the section about electrifying transportation and all of that. I mean, we don't know where we're going to go. We may have a good idea of where we want to wind up, but how to get there is the question.
Okay. Ray?
Yeah, I was just agreeing with the generality. It gives you the freedom then to make changes as needed.
Okay. Let's see. And I think the last person we were on with detailed comments was Stu. And I think did you finish up, Stu?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so is there anybody who has not had a chance to speak to details that wants to? Chris?
I just wanted to follow up. So through the course of our meeting here, I have been in touch with Brandon, and I did forward along to Stu the housing capacity analysis document in its final form as presented to council. Specific to that, I feel like, Rick, when you received that, if you know, there are very kind of focused action items related to the SEEP that were endorsed by the Housing Policy Commission, and I think it might be useful to maybe put a short summary in that. I mean, really specific. They're dealing with location of housing and density in terms of, you know, mixed use opportunity areas for reduction of travel and transportation infrastructure. And I'm just wondering if we can.
Suggesting we put that up in the 2020, 2021 activity section, that this has happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want some help on a summary on that, I'd be glad to provide it. You can also find that kind of in the analysis. You'll see it as you read through that. It's specific to, it basically starts at page 14 and continues on to page 16.
Okay, great, thank you. Gary?
Chris, if you agree, I would like for the commission to have as a part of its upcoming or the current work program to coordinate with the Housing Commission on identifying which of those strategies, included in that analysis, should actually be moved forward to the Planning Commission for consideration for adoption as code changes, because there are many of them, and I think many of them are central to our task here. So it doesn't do us a lot of good to have them in a plan. We need to get them in the code, and I would love for us to try to work with the Housing Commission to move those forward.
I agree. I think some of these instances, though, are a little more ambiguous than explicit code definition. You know, in terms of really looking at the fabric of the urban growth boundary and how that kind of overlay works within the city limits. Brandon's gonna, you know, essentially be working with us throughout the evolution of this process, and I think Gary too, absolutely, where applicable, if we can get these explicitly as ordinances. I just feel like it's sometimes difficult. It almost does us a disservice to put that in explicit format that can also create, I think, what did you say, draconian resistance, or it can almost create more resistance in doing that method than trying to look at, I think, overlays and incentivization and development. And that's, but I think we can have that offline. That's up besides the point right now.
Yeah, I want to point out we only have 20 minutes left, and there's still several things that really need to be accomplished tonight. So if this is something that could be pushed, to be honest, it's already going over my head. I'd like to do that. So are there other detailed comments on the document? I'm hoping not, because we're running out of time. So not hearing anybody interject, they've got to say something. So I'd like to move on in my outline of what we're doing for the update tonight. The next thing was appointing a team to take all the commentary that we've heard tonight and authorize them to make the changes and submit the document to the council for the September 7th meeting, including preparing a slide deck that I presume that I will speak to. Remind me, Stu, are you normally there too, or just the chair does this, or what?
Yeah, I come when I'm able to. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I usually don't end up saying anything, but I'm happy to be there.
Okay. So I'm assuming that Jeff and I are going to stick with this to do both the document refinement and the abstraction of the final document into slides. And so the question is whether there's one or two other people that want to participate in that process.
I would just have a comment on procedure. If you have two people, in fact, if you have three, or if you have two people participate, that's certainly a majority of the commission. And I just want to avoid the appearance even that we're making decisions outside the committee meeting process.
No, I was trying to be careful. 4 is less than a quorum. And so it would be Jeff and I and 2 more people would be 4. That's not a majority.
Of the existing members?
Huh?
Isn't 4 more than half of the existing members of our commission?
No, it actually, to have a quorum, you have to have a majority of the size of the body. It's not the size of the people who are actually currently sitting on the body.
That's a different interpretation.
Yeah, no, I'm fairly certain that's correct because I looked into it fairly deeply.
Okay.
Right.
Just one thing to keep in mind is I'll be there anyway. So I think that may take up one of those slots, just from proximity.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about during the presentation. I'm talking about
Oh,
people
okay.
now in the presentation.
To
who
prep
can
it.
actually do the
Okay.
work that we have outlined tonight.
Okay.
And so I'm proposing that Jeff and I will once again go at it, and I'm asking if there's one or two other people that will basically be on an email thread resolving tonight's discussion into an actual document and set of slides.
You can keep me on that thread, of course, but maybe that was the
You don't
plan.
count. So
Yeah.
I will.
Okay.
I'm happy to help if it's helpful, but I'm also happy for somebody else to do it. I feel like I've had my say. So whatever. And what's the time frame? I guess is the next 2 weeks really, because you have to submit it in time for the September 7th meeting. Right?
Yes, and the council stuff is a 2-week lead time, is
Weeks,
my
yeah,
understanding.
that's-
So yes, we
it's-
only have 2 weeks to do this. So I'm happy to have Bob help. Is there anybody else that wants to participate?
Yeah, Rick, I'm going to be out of town the next 3 weeks, so that won't really work too well.
Okay, anybody else? That's fine. So the three of us will do this in concert with Stu being able to comment. Okay, that seems like a plan to me. The next thing,
Rick, did you want to go over the appendix, the action items?
yeah, that was, well, the list of goals.
Yeah,
Yes, with the time names, I'd like to do that. I had also hoped to talk about the look ahead, but I'm not sure. I suspect we're not going to get to that. So let me just briefly comment on the look ahead. At the September meeting, a big chunk of the meeting's apparently going to be taken up by NRU, so that helps fill in that meeting. But I'm hoping that each of the initiative leads will get back to me with when they can be ready to bring something to the commission, so I can start outlining the next several months of our meetings, so that I'm both sure we're not overloaded and that we don't basically waste meeting time, because it's a very critical resource to this commission. So if you are one of the initiative or project leads, please get back to me, certainly by the next meeting, but preferably in the next couple of weeks after you thought about what it is that needs to happen, and reach out to other commissioners to help you make it happen. That would be extremely helpful for keeping the commission moving. Okay, so with that, I'd like to go to the appendix. Let me try to get it up here. I can only find my mouse. Here it is. Okay, so my assumption is that Appendix 2 and 3, there's not need for detailed comment. If that's not true at this point, I think you're just going to have to send me an email with whatever it is that you would like changed. And so with the remaining less than 15 minutes, I want to focus on Appendix 1, which is the CPC 2021 through 22 goals. I want to start with the two that have question marks on them. Under formal planning, it says participate in a formal public outreach and education effort. That has a question mark because it wasn't clear to me that we have the bandwidth to do that. What is the opinion of the commission? Ray?
yeah, I wasn't sure what that referred to also. I know we talked about a need for education for reduction of fossil gas. So I didn't know how broad that outreach statement is that you put down here.
Well, if it's specific to one of the initiatives, I think it belongs under the initiatives rather than in the formal planning section. And so I wasn't thinking formal planning has a very wide scope. And that's why I was thinking that would be very burdensome. And so my preference would be to strike that one. Tanya?
It seems that this is possibly referring to the multi-commission effort around doing public education and engagement. And this commission would have a minor role in that, I think, if it goes forward. And so I would be more inclined, rather than striking it entirely, I would be more inclined to maybe rephrasing it and putting it down as a project, as an individual project. And then to the extent that we can leverage that education effort to move the goals of the CPC forward, we can do it, but we're not committing ourselves to anything that's outside of those other 5 topic areas.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I think I would know how to move it and rephrase it. Any other comments on that one? If not, City Council seat update and presentation. Given all the other discussion we've had, this doesn't seem appropriate. It seems like this one really should be struck. Okay, I'm not hearing any
I agree.
disagreement with that. Those are the 2 that I particularly wanted to bring attention to.
Okay, I have one more under formal planning.
Okay.
The next to the bottom one, review and comment on the energy, air, water conservation element of the comprehensive plan. I didn't know we were going to address any of the comprehensive plan next year.
Well, Stu and I had a conversation about that today, and I don't know that I would want to commit to a goal of that, but it's something that I think is worth exploring. Gary?
Well, a review and comment, I'm not sure, that's different than rewriting it. So what is it we're looking for there, the way you have it written?
Jeff, do you want to speak to that? Because I didn't actually write that.
Yeah, in general, what we did was we just went through the document and pulled out what looked like specific goals. So with few exceptions, I certainly wasn't making anything new up.
So my question is, does the planning department anticipate updating this element next year? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, Stu, do you want to, do you have a 2 or 3 sentence summary of what we talked about earlier?
Yeah, my sense of it is that this chapter of the comp plan is nobody's priority but ours, because of the other workloads that are happening, and they're happy to support us in reworking or revising that chapter at some point. But looking at their staffing levels right now, it's not going to happen probably next year even. But that doesn't mean nothing can be done in the meantime. It just means we're probably not going to see a full formal process right out of the gate.
So maybe then we do spend some time on it next year, but it's not going to be completed.
That's probably a good goal to have.
Yeah. Well, so Ray, this is in your bailiwick, so what do you want it to say?
Maybe start review on the
Initiate.
energy, air, or initiate review.
Okay.
I wouldn't say take out comment, just initiate review. So we're going to review it
Okay.
because we're looking at, I think previously we talked about the master electrical plan might fit in here. That's where a lot of the SEEP goals could maybe fit in here because there's water, So anyway.
Yeah, but the formal planning could get overloaded real fast. So the electrical stuff is all down in sustainable electricity.
True, but in terms of where it would fit in the comp plan is the question, I guess.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're going to be far enough to worry about that this next year.
No, that's why I'm just saying we're going to initiate a review. And why
Right.
we're reviewing it, we're just trying to see if when we get around to making an update to the plan, what might we be thinking about for additions or changes?
Okay. So in that spirit, each of the initiative leads, if you want to comment on the list of goals and see if you're really signed up for these things. And if you need to think about it and get back to us, that's okay. But if you know what you want to say right now, that would be even better. Bob? I can't hear you.
I was just checking my mute. Yeah, Chris and I are on clean buildings. And we've got a division obviously on that. I would say just need to write something that's enhance the USDA energy retrofit program for election. We'll fix the language. I'll give you some language on that because it's not the USDA energy retrofit program. That's a loan. I don't know that it's going to be doing it on renters and low income. I think we can be a little bit more general on that. And so we'll come up with a sentence there. And I don't know, Stu, whether you had the same comment that you had before about support city efforts to increase energy efficiency and phase out natural gas. Do you want to use that same terminology before to reduce emissions through electrification?
That's a much safer way to present it.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to do something illegal to trigger a lawsuit. So I just as well avoid anything
I think that's right.
controversial. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to suggest support city efforts to increase energy efficiency and emissions reduction through electrification.
And speaking to that same clean buildings there, I think we can amend the residential solar access code to support solar ready efforts or something to that degree rather than the 30% explicit definition there. I think that would work fine. And the other thing I would add to that is supporting housing capacity analysis efforts. I mean, obviously that is changing now into housing production strategies document is what the city will be formally moving into as the next step in that effort. So I feel like it would be worthwhile for us to add our involvement in that process as well.
I agree. It's the housing analysis gives us the big buckets of housing types, but it doesn't tell us what we're going to focus on first. And I think that the timing of it's really important in terms of that production strategy. What do we focus on first is a big issue for climate.
So to that degree, Rick, I think it's perhaps a line item saying participate in housing production strategies document with the City of Ashland.
Okay.
Yeah.
I presume that third bullet point that includes mandate will be modified to provide some other phrase that is less specific.
I think incentivize works.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the third bullet point reference.
It says work with planning department to mandate solar reservation.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Just using a different word. I don't care what it is.
Yep. Okay.
And under sustainable electricity, you want to take the airport out for the 1 megawatt project.
Yep.
So I know we're almost out of time, but I saw one little thing here. Oh shoot, where'd it go? It was in the phasing out of gas engines, and it's written to sort of, right at the end, phase out. I think we're beginning or initiating that, not completing that work in the next year, right? So
yes,
maybe obvious, but just to make it clear to the reader.
I think it's a good thing to change.
Also, I'm not sure that it would be within our authority on the path of off natural gas to be the ones to draft a revised franchise agreement. I think that might put some hackles up, but we could certainly participate in the renegotiation or redrafting or re-envisioning, whatever you want to say about it. Certainly the commission could go ahead and just make a draft. Whether that would be welcome or appreciated, I don't know.
Yeah, given the discussion we had much earlier tonight,
Mhm.
I think it's clear we need to reword that.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the BPA contract.
Okay, anything
Just a
else?
minute. Yeah, 1 minute.
Oh,
I know. That's why I'm asking, is there anything else? Because I'd like to just gavel it down.
well, under transportation, it's not the urban land use transportation plan, it's the implementation plan.
Okay. Okay, I'm not hearing any more comments and we are out of time. So I'm really quite happy with the way the whole thing went. I think we built some consensus and we know what we're going to do and all that good stuff.
It's a good document. We just got to get people to read it now.
You got something you want to say, Bob?
Just a note that there's a third project that we talked about. We moved something down to a third project, so just a placeholder reminder. I don't remember what it was, but we did.
Public outreach.
Yeah, I don't either, but I'm going to review the
Exactly. Thank
recording.
you. Yep, you got it. Public outreach. Yep, got it. Okay,
Okay, very good.
thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Good job.
Good job.
Yeah.
On we go.
Okay.
See you in September.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.